I figured I should make a video defending OG Cinderella by comparing her to her live-action counterpart, because OG Cinderella has been accused of having some problems, with those problems being Cinderella being a weak character with no personality, who did nothing to change her own life but to wait for others to do that for her instead, which apparently got fixed in the 2015 live-action remake. Except that this remake fixed nothing because you can't fix what isn't broken, so let's talk about that, shall we? So in the original movie, Cinderella becomes an orphan when she was a little kid. She starts being treated as a servant by the only people who are the closest thing to her family she has at the moment, and that was the only life she would ever know for a very long time. That's why I really hate it when people say that Cinderella was weak, or she never stood up for herself in the original movie, because the very opposite of that is what happens at the very beginning. Cinderella was falsely accused of putting a mouse inside her stepsister's teacup, and Lady Tremaine wants an explanation. This is how it happened.
Oh, please, you don't think that
Hold your tongue.
Although this is a short scene, two important things can be noticed here. One, Cinderella did stand up for herself. The scene alone debunks almost every single absurd allegation against her character. In that scene alone, this Cinderella did more than the other Cinderella ever did. And two, Cinderella is absolutely powerless here. She tries to defend herself from a false accusation, but to no success because she is at the bottom of her home's hierarchy ever since her father died. It's easy to accuse Cinderella of being a weak character when she is alone and the other people she lives with have nothing but contempt for her. And it's been like this ever since she was a little kid after her father's death. Now, how is it for Cinderella in the 2015 remake? Things don't start happening to Cinderella until she's a grown-up woman. Other than her mother's death, of course. Lady Tremaine won't start being a part of her life until she's either in her late teens or early 20s, which begs the question, why wouldn't she do something? That's what I've seen a lot of people do about a 1950s Cinderella. But in this new adaptation, that is a fair question to be asked. After all, she's not an orphan kid when those bad things are happening. This is a total different environment when compared to the original Cinderella. Because here, she was a little girl with no parents alive and an abusing step-family who treated her like their servant. This is different from being a grown-up woman by the time she starts being one. And this live-action Cinderella wasn't even alone by the time she started being bossed around, because there were other servants in the house who liked her and treated her well. You're way less powerless here than if you were a little kid with both parents dead. They tried to give us this lame excuse of Cinderella's dad being away on business trips or whatever until he finally dies and Cinderella becomes the only servant in the house. It gets even worse when Disney tries to distance itself from the original movie by making her run away because she was so sad about how cruel she was being treated by them. Not that Cinderella running away was a bad thing in itself. It would be the only thing left to do at this point, to be honest. But Disney tried to make Cinderella an independent person who said enough is enough and decided to leave that toxic environment, but then she goes back to that hell anyway because she met this cute guy in the woods. Why would that event make you return to that place? Back to those people? Then Cinderella is hanging around with a former housemaid and she asks Cinderella the obvious, "What are you still doing there?" And we're given this dumb answer.
Because I made my mother and father a promise to cherish the place. We were so happy. They loved our house and now that they're gone, I love it for them.
But then we know that she leaves anyway because she marries the prince in the end. This is simply Disney standing uncertainly poised between we want to settle new things for the new movie, but also we can't distance ourselves too much from the original one, so let's try to get the best of both worlds, even though they totally contradict each other by the end of the movie. But wait, there's more. Unlike the original movie, we were never given a real example of Cinderella standing up for herself in this live-action adaptation until the very end. Really? It's simply Cinderella being mistreated for over 100 minutes of this dumb movie until she finally confronts Lady Tremaine in the end. But it's already too late. If there is one thing sharing about this new Cinderella, it's how submissive she is to all that. Of course she looks unpleased with that, but she just stands there and does what she's told anyway. Remember, this is a grown-up woman who was never treated like a servant by anyone up until now, let alone by the people who are now her family. This is totally different from losing your family and becoming a servant as a little kid. Keep that in mind. Also, Original Cinderella is shown defending herself at the beginning of the movie, whereas 2015 Cinderella won't do that for over an hour. There's a scene when Lady Tremaine comforts Cinderella, who is crying because her father had to leave again, and then she asks Cinderella to call her Madam. Then Lady Tremaine talks about how her daughters are not good at sharing the same bedroom, and Cinderella was about to give a suggestion when Lady Tremaine puts words in her mouth out of nowhere, and Cinderella does literally nothing. In fact, when Lady Tremaine makes Cinderella leave her room and go to sleep in the freaking attic, that's how she reacts.
How very pleasant. No cats. No stepsisters.
You dumb idiot. This movie spends more time showing Cinderella suffering around us means to sympathize with her more than anything. But it falls flat when you stop to think that this is a grown-up woman who's never lived like that before. This is not how it works. In the original movie, however, Cinderella had her hardships to face, although it was never as bad as in the 2015 remake. But the thing is, the 1950 movie was saving Lady Tremaine's real cruelty for the right moments. Those moments being Lady Tremaine cunningly persuading her daughters to ruin Cinderella's ball dress and locking her up against her will. However, in this new movie, Cinderella is mistreated 24/7, which makes us wonder why she didn't leave any sooner when she had the means to do so, and why she just returned after meeting the prince. There's a scene showing Cinderella not being fed enough, just eating what was left from their dinner. Literally eating scraps.
In their defense, they did share with her the very food they ate. Or rather, the scraps from their table.
Then she's sleeping right next to the fireplace because of how cold it was at night, thus making her being called Cinderella. It's not like the original Cinderella was living a wonderful life at all. In fact, she is despised by her sisters and stepmother, but Cinderella tries to see the good side of things most of the time. When she starts crying because her dress was ruined by her stepsisters, she sobs about how it was all for nothing, meaning that she has tried to be good to no avail. Her life was never as miserable as eating literal leftovers and sleeping right next to a fireplace to keep warm at night like in the live-action adaptation. But it makes sense in the original movie because they say the cruelty of Lady Tremaine and her daughters for the right moment, when Cinderella was most excited and had high hopes for her, and her dress being ruined and left out alone was when Cinderella lost it. It's like all those bad things she managed to tolerate on a daily basis culminated into this, and this is the point where she couldn't take it anymore. The original Cinderella is also accused of wanting to go to the ball just to see the prince, when in fact there is no mention of Cinderella wanting to see the prince or go to see any man at all. The 2015 Cinderella, however, wants to go to the ball to see kids. Even though she wasn't aware that he was the prince, she wanted to go to the ball for the sake of a guy, which is not something bad in itself at all. She wants to go somewhere to see the cute guy she's met before. So what? What annoys me is how some people saw OG Cinderella wanting to go to a party to see a man as something bad, but in this new version, it's okay. Pick one. When the ball is over and Lady Tremaine figures that Cinderella is the owner of the glass slipper, we have the first confrontation scene between Cinderella and Lady Tremaine. After an hour, but I suppose it's always better late than never, I guess. But it still gets worse. In the original movie, Cinderella is locked up in her room in a tower and she behaves as any other human being with a sane mind would. She starts screaming in desperation, begging to be released. The 2015 Cinderella freaks out for 3 seconds and then she is shown singing and dancing afterwards. Notice that I think the 2015 Cinderella spent more time locked up in the attic than original Cinderella did, but she spends more time dancing around while being literally locked up in a basement. I can't take this character seriously. But don't worry, it gets way worse. Because the narrator says that Cinderella's spirit wasn't broken because her moments with the prince would become beautiful distant memories. She is locked up in a freaking basement against her will. Her last chance of being happy is looking for her downstairs, and all she does is to sing and dance around like an idiot, while sort of accepting her defeat because at least she will have her precious memories or something. When if she were to beg Lady Tremaine to let her out, she would have been heard like they heard her song. But at least the begging to be released would also make sense given that anyone with the same mind would do that. What a pathetic defeatist. This character is a complete joke. This dumb movie. They even copied the original movie by making the birds and mice help her out, but in the original movie it works because they heard Cinderella's screams and answered her call for help. In this live-action movie, however, although they noticed that she was in trouble, it falls so flat. She is never shown calling for help or anything. She just mostly shown dancing and singing anyway. Why should I believe that this character is more independent and better than the other one while behaving in such an unrealistic way? Why should I care she was rescued just in time for the big moment? She behaved like she barely deserved it. It was merely a series of efforts made by other characters. Precisely what people had accused OG Cinderella of. Finally, the captain's taken to where Cinderella is locked up and she stands up for herself again after an hour of this movie. Congratulations. Anyway, if there is something that I've learned from this movie is that even though being kind and sweet are positive quality traits that should not be set aside like qualities that demean women's empowerment, there's a fine line about how this kindness should be handled when writing a character. The thing is, they tried to keep the sweetness and kindness of OG Cinderella in the 2015 Cinderella, which I am grateful for. I don't want to see another insufferable emancipated character like Emma Watson's Belle anytime soon. But they ended up making this new Cinderella more submissive to the absurd things happening to her than actually being kind. Trying to give Lily James more screen time as the protagonist defeats the purpose here because it means that Cinderella is now a grown-up woman, and the fact that those bad things happen to her at this age and she does nothing for most of the movie feels very stupid. Having those things happening to you as a little orphan kid is way easier to happen, hence why it didn't feel stupid in 1950s Cinderella. I've considered the live-action adaptation of Cinderella as my favorite Disney live-action remake for a very long time. Lily James gave us a decent performance with what she was given, mostly due to Lily James keeping Cinderella's kindness in her performance, but in the end, her character fails for reasons explained throughout my video. Cate Blanchett was overall decent as Lady Tremaine as well, and some moments truly made me despise her character due to her cruelty, although Disney continued to follow the formula of giving the villain a tragic backstory when this new Lady Tremaine reveals how much she loved her first husband, even though Disney did it in a more subtle way in 2015 Cinderella when compared to the other Disney remakes produced before and after this movie. The plot changes they did seemed minor and harmless at first, but then it all falls apart once we start thinking too hard about the plot and how those changes ended up creating more problems that simply did not exist in the original movie. And when some of these problems are addressed, the attempt of fixing or justifying them makes things worse. The prince was given a larger role to play as he changed stuff to make more use of his character throughout the movie. At first, things seemed to be placed in the right position, until I decided to give it a go to the original Cinderella movie made in 1950 and think too much about these two movies in comparison, when I finally realized that this live-action adaptation is mediocre. It's not that this movie is horrible and unwatchable or whatever. It's pretty good if you don't think too hard about it, but it's simply an empty shelf of its original self. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and if you like my content, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time around.